I want to mention briefly that our ladies who went to Bangladesh on a short-term mission are back and reporting that they had a great trip and got to engage with the church there, so that's great. It's so cool to see people involved in the work of the church across the entire world. And it's appropriate as well because we're going to be talking about the vocations and roles that we have in the church over the next 5 weeks. And so I wonder, first of all, how many of you have ever heard of APEST or the APEST test or anything like that? Is this familiar to anyone? Just a few, okay. I'm glad to hear that. We're going to learn something new together. You can be a little more excited than that. Yeah. I mean, learning is supposed to be good, I think. So we're going to be looking at a portion of Ephesians over the next few weeks, where Paul talks about the vocations that people have within the church. And Paul doesn't seem to think that anyone escapes having a vocation within the church. And in the book of Ephesians, Paul really lays out a vision in so many ways of what the church is or ought to be. And this particular section that we're going to read today in Ephesians chapter 4 mentions these giftings that the Spirit gives. And I think that this is maybe not like super holistic, but I think it is really, really good at getting at the ways in which people function within the church in order to be holistic together. That Jesus himself was at different points in his ministry fully these 5 things. And I don't think any of us are going to quite be the minister that Jesus was, but together in recognizing the gifts and skills that the Spirit has given us, we can recognize together how we come together to become an impactful, powerful church for the sake of the world. This is imagining how the Spirit might have gifted each one of us to be holistically Jesus to the world, to the community, to each other as well. And so there is a problem, I think, and this is the problem as I see it. This is the Tim Brooks opinion portion of the sermon today, okay? So take it for what it's worth. This is just my opinion. I could be wrong. There are 3 of these giftings that are really externally focused, that are really about taking ground for the gospel in the world. They're really missional, outward. They often take risk, they take energy, they take strategy, and 2 of them are really internal, about building up each other within the church. And not any one of these 5 is better than the other or more Christian or more preferable or anything like that. However, the 2 internal ones, shepherding and teaching, have been very, very privileged within the American church. We love shepherds and teachers. Why? They make us feel good. They make us feel comfortable. They settle the ground that has been taken, right? You can't always be pioneering every day of your entire life. Eventually, you need to build a camp, right? The shepherds and teachers build the camp, and they make it comfortable, and they give you a breath, and they make you feel good. And the American church has all sorts of things for shepherds and teachers to do, and we've privileged those so much for so long within the church that we just constantly want to be settled. And we constantly give jobs to people who have those 2 giftings. And we've lost any real good vision of what to do with apostles, prophets, and evangelists. We might even know what those jobs are, but how do we even organize ourselves to set those 3 free so that we're constantly doing the work of taking new ground for the sake of Jesus and our culture? And what has happened, again, this is just the Tim Brooks opinion portion. You can think I'm wrong, I might be wrong. But I think that as we become post-Christian in America, we keep privileging those that make us feel good when we gather together. Teach the truth, shepherd us, check on us, make sure we're feeling okay, make sure the church is okay, because it's scary out there. And it might be scary out there. But we need to figure out a way, again, to set our apostles, our prophets, and our evangelists free into the scary places so that we can continue to engage a culture that has shifted radically over the last 20 years. And in that shifting, we need to still be involved in the shifting places. And so we're going to talk about each of these 5 things, and I want to make it as clear as possible that even though I said that, I don't think that these 3 are more privileged than the 2 in the church. We need shepherds and teachers, absolutely. But I think it's also good for us to say, maybe there are some within our congregation who are apostles, who are prophets, who are evangelists, who aren't really sure how they fit into a shepherding and teaching American church model, and so often will end up sitting on the sidelines because they don't want to go teach 4th grade Sunday school. So, how is it we can identify within ourselves people who have missional, outward-focused, risk-taking giftings, while also making sure that we are upholding the work of the church inside of these walls as well, where we're building up, where we're shepherding and teaching and making sure that we're strong on the inside as we go outside as well. And so I'm going to read from Ephesians 4 where these giftings and this idea comes from. It's 16 verses at the start of Ephesians chapter 4. I'm going to invite you, if you would, to stand with me as Paul talks about these vocations, these giftings, these spiritual tasks and works that are given to us within the church. Starting with verse 1 in Ephesians chapter 4. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. That verse is a mouthful right there. What a call that is. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But, I think buts are always interesting. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean except he also descended into the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, as each part does its work. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. That vision and imagination given to us excites me. I believe in it. I look forward to it. I want to be mature. I want to see us all growing. I want to see us doing the gifting that God himself has given to us. And I think this verse where it talks about these 5 spiritual giftings, apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor and teacher, shepherd and teacher, is an incredible way to really think through how it is we can mature to become a part of the body of Christ with Christ himself as the head. They're passing out a piece of paper. We're going to take a test in just 1 minute. But here's the really good news. You should be so excited about what I'm about to say. You cannot fail this test. This is the best test you will have ever taken. There's an absolute certainty that everyone will pass this test. Amen. So I talked earlier, you see up here are the five giftings that we're going to talk about. And you'll see that there are the 3 that are the pioneering gifts that are about taking ground for the gospel. And there are 2 that secure and settle the taking ground, which is shepherd or pastor and teacher. And so we're going to take this test. It's a 3-minute test, but I'm going to give you 3 minutes and 30 seconds just to make sure you have enough time. If you're watching online, you could Google 3-minute APEST test, or there should be a link as well that comes up on the online service for you to, if you wanted to grab that and take it yourself. As you'll see, there are 25 questions. This is what I want, this is a 10-minute test if you think really hard about all of them. What you're supposed to do is kind of respond at a gut level. And also, don't read these and think, well, I should be this way, so I'm going to give myself a high score. Just be honest with yourself about whether or not you're really driven to the issue here. Because you don't have to score perfect across the board. Someone else is going to be privileged in the areas where you're weak. That's what Paul is talking about. It's okay to come across as weak in a couple areas and strong in other areas because the church comes together in wholeness to be the body of Christ. So we're going to put a timer up for 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Respond to these questions, and then we're going to talk about, real quickly, how it is that we scored. So go ahead. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Put it on the board. And go. done, you can keep tallying or whatever it is. But I'd like to do a survey for how that went, just to see how we ended up. Raise your hand if your top score is A, or apostle. All right, just a few, okay, all right. Raise your hand if your top score is P, or prophet. Okay, all right. Also just a few. Raise your hand if your top score is E, or evangelist. All right, very good, a few more, very nice. Raise your hand if your top score is S, or shepherd. Okay. And then finally, raise your hand if your top score is T, or teacher. Okay, very cool. Now you see how much more there are S and T's in our church, right? There's probably reasons for this in the American church, right? So I want you to know that most people, when they think about this, think of their primary and their secondary of the giftings. And so think a little bit about what your first one was and then your second one was. And then I'm going to give you just one little piece of homework, and it's not that hard, okay? Just one little piece of homework. And again, you can't fail this homework. So we've taken a test and done homework, and you've all gotten A's. So that's going great, right? Behind you, up in the gathering place, you'll see 5 windows up there. And in each one of those 5 windows, we've written the 5 different of the fivefold ministry. And I would love it, I would appreciate it if after this service, you would go upstairs and fill out 2 sticky notes that are there. And they're the extra sticky kind, so this should be able to stay. Pretty happy about that. Whoever invented the extra sticky notes really just invented what should have been the first time, but I really appreciate the work that they've done. So if you would go up there after the service and write your name, first and last, twice, on 2 different sticky notes, and then stick it to your first and second place gifting, I think it'll be really neat and a fun conversation piece to see how the church comes together in their giftings, and to see where other people are and where we're strong and where we're weak, and just have conversation around the different kind of giftings that we have within the church. So if you would please do that for me, I would be eternally grateful. Thank you very much. Again, that's in order to get there, you go up the ramp and up the stairs, and you'll be in the gathering place, and you can do that as soon as service is over. Now, each of these next few weeks, we're going to talk about the 5 giftings, one every week. And today we're going to talk about apostle. And I think apostle is an interesting word, because I could remember growing up in the church how much confusion I had over that word. And I'll tell you exactly why I had the confusion. You may not have any confusion. This may be easy for you. But I could not get my mind around why one day, say, Peter and John were disciples, and then the next day they were apostles. Is that just a word change? Is that a different thing? What did Jesus' resurrection have to do with the changing titles and roles? I had a really hard time getting my mind around what was happening with this word apostle. And the simple definition that you can find in Merriam Dictionary or the Oxford English Dictionary or whatever is basically one who is sent on a mission. And that really is a clue and a key for me, because truly when Jesus is ascending into heaven, he gives them a mission. We call it the Great Commission, to go and baptize people in all nations, right? Given the commission, they're on a mission now. And of course, the most famous apostle is the one who enters the fray later, and that is Paul. Paul is defending himself constantly in his writings that he is an apostle. He has this authority to be an apostle, and he talks about his conversion experience and how he came face to face with Jesus, and this has ordained him to be an apostle. And Paul truly was an apostle. He was on an absolute mission. And one of my favorite things about Paul is that he certainly worked on evangelism. He wanted people to meet Jesus. But I don't know that he was always super duper effective at that. what he was really effective at was building systems in churches and people and helping them think about how to come alive in order to do the work in the town and the place that they already were. And in fact, there's a great moment that really enlivens me to think about Paul's apostleship in Acts chapter 18 when he's in Corinth. And Corinth would be a place that he would write multiple letters to, trying to remind them of who they ought to be in Christ, having been converted. There's trouble and struggle in Corinth, but Paul is engaged there. But he gets going in Corinth by partnering up in Acts 18 with Priscilla and Aquila, who were tent makers. And Paul, in order to support his ministry of traveling and being involved in cities that were not where he was from, where he didn't own a home, where he didn't have roots, he joined in their work of tent making in order to raise funds for himself and the mission in the ministry in that city of Corinth. That sort of willingness to go in a place where he didn't have something already prepared for himself, then his willingness to partner up with other believers to work and to raise funds and to make sure that his mission got going and took off the ground is such a compelling vision of what apostleship might look like. He went and broke new ground across the entire known world and would sometimes take up labor tasks in order to make it happen in these places that he was called to go. I always appreciate that so much about Paul. So there are archetypes and heroes who are apostles. And this is a bit of an image that isn't necessarily Christian, but you can see how this gifting can work in our world as well. You might think of these as synonyms or images or imaginations of what an apostle might look like. A founder, a general, a visionary, a pioneer, an adventurer, an innovator, entrepreneur, leader, problem solver, right? This is the idea of an apostle, is about going into places that are uncharted, unforeseen, unknown, maybe unreached, unstrategized for, and trying to get something going, sometimes with not very much resource at all. This is an incredible gifting for the sake of the church. And so the functions of the apostles might look like this. An apostle might organize people around sentness. They may get people fired up about the vocation in the church to go, to be sent. Apostles go, certainly, but sometimes also it's about bringing people along with them to experience sentness. Apostles also maintain integrity, DNA, values, and paradigm. And so that means like really having a sense for what the church is and what the church is trying to accomplish, and then take that DNA to a place where the DNA is not the same, right? So that could look like church planting. It could look like satellite. It could look like nonprofit ministry. All of these sort of things are really knowing what the culture they're trying to bring of their church is, and then imprinting that culture in a place where the culture is different. Apostle could look like networking, could look like church planting. I mentioned that. But certainly I think this is the one that we really can wrap our mind around. Apostle looks like innovation and risk-taking. Really, really, really being not unaware, but unafraid by risk. Being so inspired by the gospel that they're willing to put something on the line in order to see the gospel take hold and expand. We might think of mature expressions of the church through the lens of apostle to look like this: that the church is theologically consistent, that it's missionally engaged in all of life, that it's culturally wants to, longs for, structures itself to have a dynamic impact in the culture that it's plugged into. It's organizationally adaptive, it's scalable, church planting is scalable, things can happen, and then different movements emerge and follow apostles wherever they go. I think a lot of times the most exciting movements in the history of the church have been in places that surprise the insiders. And oftentimes, in order for an incredible movement to happen, it's often apostles who have kind of moved aside, cleared space, for this incredible movement of God to happen. And then finally, the desired social impact of an apostle. This is the heart of the apostle, to see a transformed society, to see the gospel saturate the part of the world that it's in, and to see a church unified in purpose and on mission together. This is the heart of the apostle, is to see this happen, right? And so the apostle isn't just running around doing things, right? The apostle is set on fire by God. The Spirit is alive in the apostle, and they go because of what the Spirit is doing in their church and in their life. And so you might think to yourself, okay, that's all a whole bunch of theory. So what are some potential ministries today? What are some ideas of what an apostle could do, even in the context in which we're in right here? And so I'm glad you asked. I have a few ideas. First of all, you could start a ministry or a community on mission. We've talked a lot over the last year about communities on mission, and I think people who are apostles would be great fit on that. A community on mission is about identifying a societal need, a place where people are hurting, a place where people are struggling, and then organizing people around meeting that need. And then also we have another wing of people who would probably be good for a shepherd or a teacher to partner with the apostle to help develop the people who are going to meet the need. And so we have 3 or 4 communities on mission going, and we're always interested in starting more. And one of the reasons that we don't just do it is because we really need apostle-minded people with a heart for the world to really start on their own volition and their own energy, starting these things, getting going, and then gathering people along with them out of the heart of the church to go and to meet the needs of the world. And so if you're first or second as apostle, you may think, I'd be interested in starting a community on mission. Well, talk to me or talk to one of our pastors on the way out and start dreaming with us and thinking about what it could be like. Like I said, we have some communities on mission, so you may just want to start by joining up with one. We've got some going on. We can talk to you about those as well. You might also be willing to start a ministry at work, at a sports field. If you're like me, I spent every waking hour of my Friday night and my Saturday at a sports field this week. Every waking hour. It was just one place to another. And the great news is that I was blessed with rainy and cold weather the whole time. Right? And so I do have like a hint of apostle in me. It might be my second, but it also might be my third. And I was really excited this week. I mean, this has been years in the making that we've been working with families connected to us in athletics that my girls play. And I had 2 different families come up to me this weekend, not unprompted by me, telling me that they want to come and visit our church. And I was like, this is amazing. And I'm telling you, this has taken years of building trust with people. Because on the other hand, I also had this happen to me this weekend. I met someone new. They might have said a word that might have had 4 letters in it in front of me. And then they asked, as people do, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a financial broker, actually. No, I said, I'm a pastor, and immediately, gosh, I hate this so much. You can see the rewind button go in people's brains. It's the most horrifying look that I ever see. And I have to say, and it's true, like, you can't offend me, it's okay. Like I used to tell my mom when she'd get mad at bad words on TV, I went to public school, Mom. I heard these things before. We'll be okay, right? And so like being a public Christian, whether whether it's just like your heart or your vocation like me, isn't always the easiest thing, and it's not always fast work. But it was so exciting for me to have some payoff of people coming up to me unprompted and saying that they want to come and visit our church and to check us out. It's not always easy or quick to do this work of apostleship. But if you're willing to just be present as a Christian on a mission, even when you're just watching your kids play soccer or baseball or basketball or whatever it is, you'll be shocked at how much impact you might have if you go to the places that you go in life with intention. You'll be shocked. You might even be able to start something at your kids' schools. Who knows? If apostleship is at all alive in your life, use the connections in the places you already go. Don't be afraid. I just saw, I'm going to preach now for real. I just saw someone, not anyone in this church, you guys are all off the hook. I saw someone put on Facebook this week that the problem with America is we're not allowed to read the Bible in schools anymore. And I swear to you, I read this 2 minutes after one of my daughters texted me about the Bible from school. Right? We're not the perfect family. We're not talking about the Bible all the time. I promise you that. But my daughter literally texted me a Bible question from inside the school, and then I turned on Facebook, and I saw someone saying you're not allowed to bring the Bible into school, and I thought, well, goodness, my daughter's going to get arrested. Sometimes in our own fear, right? In our own fear, we tell ourselves stories that aren't wholly true. Is the world differently than we grew up? Yeah, of course it is. Is the world a little stranger to be a public Christian? Yeah, of course it is, obviously. But we tell ourselves stories to get ourselves angry rather than taking the heart of apostle and just going and being. Right? So no one's going to arrest my daughter for reading the Bible in school. It's not going to happen, right? Sometimes we have to even just be bold and take risks and be present in the place that God plants us and see that something might happen because we're faithful. A couple more ideas for potential ministries in today. You can help raise funds for existing ministries in Crossroads. Now, I didn't say write a bigger check, did I? If you want to write a bigger check, I can point you in the right direction. But there are people who have skills that I don't have, that Brian, our executive pastor, don't have, that know where to find money to fund ministries, right? And you might just know how to make connections and where money exists that is out there that a simple, humble pastor who learned how to read Greek doesn't know how to do, right? So you might be able to take new ground for the church just because you understand how the financial world works in ways that pastors don't. You might be interested in just stepping up your leadership at church, really, really becoming a leader at church. You might just ask leaders and pastors what their dreams are, what they're longing for, what their wildest imagination is, and see if you can't come alongside dreams that are happening and people who don't know how to get the dreams done and help get those dreams off the ground. That might be your skill set. Might be interesting if you have apostle as one of your top two, to talk to the leaders that you're connected with and ask, what are your dreams? And see if there's some way that you can help bring those to life. And then finally, I suppose this could work for all five of them, but mentoring, apostles who mentor are great. I want to point out, and I want to do so very gently because you can't fail this test, but there were very few apostles who raised their hand, and I suspect, this is just my feeling, that most churches in America would be the same. Right? We've privileged for so long shepherds and teachers that shepherds and teachers feel really comfortable in the church, and people who are apostles, this is okay, eventually kind of self-select out, not because they've given up on Jesus, but because they're just not sure where they fit into it all. And so there are probably people who you know, who love Jesus very much, who don't go to church much, who don't show up much because they want to do things for Jesus, And our gatherings in the American church is really to like, feed me, feed me, feed me. And that's hard for them to engage with. But if you are an apostle, if you have that gifting, mentoring people into how to use that, how to take off with that, how to do something with that, will help us rebalance within the church. I think it'd be an incredible thing to do, to find other people, younger people, people who aren't as far along in the faith, and help them nurture this gift, because we need apostles in the church. And I'm not talking about Crossroads. I could be. I'm talking about the church. We need apostles and we need churches who strategize to help apostles as well, so that we can really begin to take ground again in our world. More than anything, the last word that I really want to leave with you is a compound word, you might call it two, but I think it's one, is risk-taking. Apostles are willing risk-takers for the sake of the gospel. And I certainly think in our world today, rather than telling ourselves it's so bad, it's so scary, it's so backwards, it can be all of those things, but we still need risk-takers who are willing to engage back into the tide for the sake of the gospel and see that the world can change because of the gospel. We need risk-takers. And so I'm going to show the thing that I started with again. And again, really, really hammer home the fact that I think we've really struggled with what to do with the pioneering gifts, and apostle is one of them. And in the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about prophet, evangelist, and then, a lot of you raised for the last two. We're going to talk about those two, and again, those are not bad. The church needs shepherds and teachers. They are vital and important roles. We're going to talk about each one of these over the next few weeks and hopefully bring imagination and joy and excitement for who God has created you to be. And my especial hope is that if you are one of these pioneering gifted people, prophet, apostle, evangelist, that you can find some imagination and joy to really let those gifts flow and to come to the surface and see what it is that God might do through you for the sake of seeing the gospel really take roots in our community, in our world, through the way God has created us to be. Again, I want to remind you, it would be very meaningful to me if you would be willing after the service to go upstairs. I already see some people clearly bored by my sermon who have already gone up there and started putting their names. I appreciate that very much. But if you would, after our service, go up there, write your name down, and put it on two, your first and your second place one, and set it up there. And let's just see the tapestry build of how we have so many people within our community that God has gifted in these particular ways for the sake of us coming together as a whole to be the body of Christ under the headship of Christ. And we're going to, before we go today, celebrate what God is doing through our community. And often it takes someone who was an evangelist at some point to tell the story of Jesus, that people would be raised in the faith and come to baptism. And we're going to celebrate that today. I want to tell you as well that last Sunday we had 3 baptisms at our 11 o'clock service. And I want to show you some pictures just to make sure that you as the 9 o'clock service can feel involved in that as well. So God is doing incredible work in people's lives. And it's such a blessing and an honor to be at Crossroads. Yeah, you can clap to that. That's exciting. And I'm excited as well today that we're going to do 3 more baptisms in this service as well. And so we're going to celebrate together that God is calling, equipping, changing lives. Pastor Jen is going to come out and lead us in the Apostles' Creed, where we're going to all confess our faith together. And then we're going to celebrate the testimonies and stories of these cherished members of our church's lives as they give themselves over to the baptismal waters. And I want to remind you as well that I think the best thing we can do, the most appropriate thing we could do, is that when they emerge from the water, having been baptized, just cheer, hoop, hollered, be crazy, I don't care, be loud, celebrate what God is doing in people's lives. Would you do that with me? All right, great. Let's go to the baptisms.
As we get ready to celebrate baptism together,